deceived.
We are being corrupted.
We are being infiltrated. We are being made ill.
We are deprived. We are malnourished.
But now is our time.
Free yourself of these shackles of bondage.
Open your eyes and restore your original, unconditioned, and unlimited power.
The Syncretism Academy is based on direct knowledge as opposed to indoctrination. We have revived this academy, the first of its kind in 1500 years since Emperor Justinian closed the Neoplatonic academies by edict in 527 AD. The Neoplatonists of ancient times brought together and syncretized all fields of human knowledge, including health, philosophy, cosmology, and spiritual sciences for the purpose of human ascension, evolution, optimization, and to divinize humanity. This knowledge has been oppressed and persecuted right under our noses. So in this war for veracity, we have resurrected the ancient teachings to enable us to remember these truths. The Syncretism Academy will enable you to reassemble the teachings that have been withheld from us and allow us to unite them to make one cohesive field of knowledge.
In the Academy, we fully understand that without body, there is no mind. That being said, it is crucial we utilize an extensive healing protocol, allowing the body to merge with mind. This provided allows the ability of ascension. Proper physical education is absolutely necessary and crucial for this development, meaning proper nutrition and physical exercise is mandatory. Our private mentors, physical trainers, and chefs give you all the tools you need to properly merge body and mind through the teachings of syncretism. When you heal the body, you heal the mind, giving you the connection to the spiritual realm, allowing you to start your ascension and regain your unconditioned godship. Paradise belongs here on earth. Now is the time to take it back. Join us. Join the Syncretism Society and allow yourself to become who you really are. Health in mind, body, and spirit. Welcome, everyone, to the Syncretism Society podcast, episode number 5. We have a very, very special guest tonight. Guys, get excited. Mr. Ken Wheeler is here. Round of applause.
On, please.
Yes.
No, yeah, no applause for me. I'm nobody. I kind of like being nobody.
Oh, please.
Honestly. No, it's a good thing. The ancients said the most praiseworthy thing was to be Akim Kana, which basically translates as a non-person. So.
Oh, wow.
Yep, very, very humble of you. Lovely. Thank you very much, Ken. That's very much appreciated.
I could barely stand, look in the mirror, and brush my teeth for 30 seconds.
Oh, come on.
Hey, do you guys want to say something in Russian? Just quickly.
Насчет чего?
Не за что.
Yes.
It's another skучный day, I guess.
Yeah, Ken is absolutely fluent in the Russian language with no accent, which is...
The fat, уродливый, сумасшедший дурак. Американский сумасшедший дурак.
God. we're not gonna translate that because it is not true. It is not true.
No, I basically just said I'm just crazy.
A crazy, yeah. And I'm saying that's
American,
not true.
For crazy fat American.
American, yeah, which is absolutely not true. So that's why there's no need for translation.
I'm definitely fat.
Yeah.
Sit behind the computer too much. I shouldn't have moved back to Kentucky from Florida. I used to be skinnier than even Santos there when I lived in Florida.
Yep.
I came back.
I remember I've seen videos of you. You were very, very skinny, like me.
Fat or skinny though, you can't polish a turd. So nothing I do is going to help on that front. So.
Oh,
well, anyway, look, I know for a fact that my followers on my channel are going to be absolutely elated
Oh yeah.
to have you, because I have been sharing clips from your videos for at least 6 or 7 years, and I've done tens and tens of presentations and videos where I've dropped your name and links to your videos and brought thousands and thousands of people over to your channel, because I have learned so much about magnetism and the dielectric field and the ether from you that I am in honor and in deep, deep gratitude. So I know my followers here on Mr. Astrotheology channel will be absolutely elated and very, very, very happy, because
For sure.
they've been telling me for years, why don't you get Ken on to talk about the ether and magnetism, etc. So today, folks, we are going to talk about what we have in common, the ether and its existence. And Ken is one who takes this subject seriously and shows with the magnetic viewing film how the ether exists, and also goes into Neoplatonism and the ancient Eastern traditions as well, and many great scientists, which I follow as well, like Eric Dollard, Walter Russell. I know you've been through his books, although you're way, way past Walter Russell. But these guys we need to tip our hats off to them as well. But I do believe that Ken is the world's leading, what I call magnetricians. I made that word up, so thank you.
Magneto.
So, yeah. And I just love talking about the reciprocating precessional hyperboloid torus field, which Ken says you cannot talk about torus fields unless you're talking about hyperbolas, etc. So the ether is the subject today, folks.
Can we talk about Ken Wheeler's background a little bit before
Sure.
yeah, if you can, Ken, it'll be wonderful to hear about you and a little bit about your background, brother.
I don't know. I'm an only child, I guess. I'm 48 years old, born in Florida. I've lived much of my life in Kentucky. At a very early age, I knew that my teachers, you know, I'm being very blunt and yet also too kind to them by saying that they were not wise. I mean, they were trying to indoctrinate us students with, you know, regurgitation and memorization rather than learning how to do something. As the old saying goes, teach someone how to fish rather than give them a fish, that whole paradigm. I worked for the government in various forms. I lived in Russia for nearly 4 years, back and forth several times. I went to Southeast Center for Photographic Studies, University of Kentucky for a few years, but it was a complete and total waste of my time. I mean, I hung out in the library. I learned far, far, far more there than I ever did from my foolish professors that were, you know, academicians. It was extremely disappointing and a total waste of my time. I spent 10 years of my life taking care of my wife, who was slowly dying of a giant brain tumor, you know, listening to her scream every night in the bedroom from phantom pains that couldn't be, you know, cured from all the morphine or Vicodin in the world. So I took care of her, and she was a nurse south at St. Mary's Hospital. I lived with her for a couple of years in East Bay in Emeryville, and then of course it's just too expensive to live there, and I brought her back out here to Kentucky. But my entire life I've been interested in languages, specifically ancient metaphysics, and I was taking college courses in high school. My teacher said I was, in their words, my Russian professor said I was a prodigy in learning ancient languages. So
Wow.
for some reason, I have some sort of gift on being able to see stuff on languages. Especially, I love ancient dead languages rather than living ones, especially deciphering secrets. And I found a lot of secrets in ancient Prakrit Pali, which is the oldest language in India. Contrary to what Indians say, it's not Sanskrit, it's Prakrit. Like
Incredible.
the Killer Edicts of King Ashoka, those are in Brahmi, not in Sanskrit. The oldest extant example of Sanskrit's the Saddharma Pundarika Sutra from the 3rd century CE. The old stuff in India is all Prakrit. But I love discovering those ancient secrets, both Greek and Indian. And every every Indian metaphysician always gravitates towards Greek metaphysics because nothing is known except the modality of the knower. Used to be president of India, Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, who's also too an Indian metaphysician. He latched on to Greek metaphysics, and so did Dr. Anandakishore Kumaraswamy, who was friends with his son, Ramapi Kumaraswamy, who's a cardiac surgeon here in the United States. He gave me the rights to all of his father's works. His father knew 27 languages and wrote so many books and articles that long after his death, they had to publish a decent sized book just listing all the books and articles that he wrote. And even though he died in 1947, they were still publishing unpublished works of his well into the 90s. He was such a prolific author. So I'm greatly respectful to his son for having given me his father's works. He said, as long as I gave them away for free, I didn't charge for them, that I had the rights to those works. But, I'm just a perennialist and a metaphysician, and obviously that doesn't pay anything. Wisdom is its own reward. I mean, I'm not going to take anything with me when I die other than wisdom. But once in a while, I'd love to, take a day or two off or take a vacation, like visit people. But oh well.
Oh.
Sorry, I had too much caffeine. That went on a little too far.
No. It's amazing, man. Really. Really. You just blew me away, to tell you the truth. Wow. That's
wonderful. There's a lot of new stuff in there that I didn't know. So
I don't attribute most of the things that I know to myself either. As you pointed out, we have to give great thanks to Walter Russell and these other people. And there's an old saying, by standing on the shoulders of giants, we're able to see further. So, vis-a-vis Dollard, Walter Russell, Plotinus, Numenius, Syrianus, Proclus, and Algus Udovinus and others, I've been able to stitch it all together, if you will, and see further. And I'm extremely grateful for that. And I never would have been able to do that without, their wisdom and insights and writing. So
beautiful. And they all spoke about the ether, didn't they? All these ancients. And then all of a sudden, someone called Einstein, who, he never invented anything. He didn't discover anything. He made no breakthroughs, and he proved no theories until he came. And then all of a sudden, the ether disappeared from all of our reckoning and all of our scientific models and all of our scientific thinking. All of a sudden, there is no ether. Correct. So how did that happen, and why do you think, Ken? And how can we then prove that the ether exists?
Well, everything moves in cycles. I mean, I don't want to directly attribute all of that to Einstein. I mean, atomism has been around since the ancient Greeks, and who knows before then. But I mean, this atomism is always brother and sister, or Siamese twin to materialism. So with the rise of materialism, we have atomism. And you actually also, to admit the ether, you admit to a metaphysical substrate, which is underneath phenomena. And then people then become responsible for themselves, both in this life and after this life. And it's an extremely scary principle. I keep telling people over and over again, and one thing that I find incredibly important is to reduce things into their most simple forms, such that not only it makes things clear, but people are able to understand it. There's only ever been two ultimate foundations for reality ever postulated all throughout human history, or at least the history that we know of. One's been the ether and the other one's been atomism. And atomism can't explain countless thousands of phenomena. It's just completely impossible. You can't explain instantaneous action at a distance. You can't explain wireless power induction in a vacuum. You can't explain light speeding back up again after it leaves glass without breaking the law of conservation of energy. You can't explain anything fundamentally. And of course, no branch of science has ever defined the term field. Will actually point you to the four Maxwellian field equations, which of course define a field over a vector with a period of time with a given result, such as joules, watts, volts, amps, so on and so forth, but they never actually define a field in itself, of itself, by itself. And if you're a hammer, everything is a nail. And if you're an atomist, everything's a particle. And anybody's free to look this up online. Take a magnet, for example. Everybody, I call it the cult of quantum. I don't mean that as a slander, but as a kind of a joke. They will tell you flat out that what's going on in a magnet is the emission of virtual photons. But this is not the input or output of any experiment ever done. It has no basis in reality. It's a conceptual abstraction for mathematicians. These people are not scientists, which should be the quest for truth. I certainly admire scientists, but they're not scientists in any Aristotelian, Pythagorean, or Platonic sense. They're mathematicians. And they fundamentally don't believe, nor do they care in anything that can't be counted or quantified. They've never defined a field, and they can't actually explain what we see in nature. It has to be fundamentally rational. To say that these things are dualities in nature, duality implying, of course, an inherent contradiction. Mother Nature doesn't deal in any dualities, but the fundamental basis of quantum, and also to relativity, not my definition, but theirs. So quantum is based upon our understanding of what light is, but they have absolutely no idea what light is. They'll tell you it's a wave and a wave particle duality. And as Einstein said, he called it das Lichtquant. And Einstein's word says, well, you can't explain light by means of a wave or, totally by a particle, but together they explain light. He calls it das Lichtquant, this wave particle duality. But there's no such thing as a wave. A wave is not what something is. A wave is what something does. You can't explain light by a particle. And I know where they get the particle abstractions from, the longitudinal refraction compression along the coaxial circuit that is light. So I do know where they actually get that from. That would be like someone ignorantly, making a declaration about a slap being a type of particle, which of course is ridiculous. I mean, it's an impact of the hand, for example, as a very kind of crude analogy, but these people are mathematicians. To them, like a hammer, everything's a nail. To them, everything's a particle. But there's nothing fundamentally that they can rationally explain in nature via atomism. So,
Right.
Did I drone on too far?
No, that was perfect.
It really was.
Wow. Yeah. So we see that they're trying to sell off the wave particle universe, but would you say it's a pulse wave universe? And the pulse would be, because I've seen you do on your whiteboard, I've seen you do a wave and then you've done the pulse in between the waves. So you're really showing that the universe magnetically is pulsating, or the ether is. Is that right?
Yeah, in a roundabout fashion. I was thinking about 10 things at once when you were actually saying that, which is an unfortunate byproduct of how my mind works, is that I'm thinking about 10 things while listening or reading something else. But yes, this conjugate nature of the universe, the magnetic and the dielectric respectively, the torus and the hyperboloid, everything is fundamentally irreducibly simplex. I mean, it has to be. I mean, even the scientists that I have great disdain for, and along with that of Einstein. And by the way, it's very important to point out, there are 4 books written about everything that people hold Einstein to be famous for were actually stolen from 2 different people. Really, there's 3, but primarily from a gentleman called Henri Poincaré. Most of his books are free for download on archive.org. He's a very, very brilliant scientist. But all of these things, including E equals MC squared, which came from, I forget the gentleman's name offhand. I don't have that note in front of me, but that did not come from Einstein. But the stuff that people look to Einstein, oh, what a genius. That came directly from Henri Poincaré. And as Einstein himself said, the key to success, I think his exact quote is to hide your sources. So that's a quote from Einstein.
Right. So the ether is there, and many experiments have proven it.
Non-Cartesian pure potential. I mean, people keep thinking in terms of Cartesian, and we human beings, like fish, we have no idea of anything. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize. When I catch an important train of thought, I try never to interrupt, so I apologize. We can only think like a fish in terms of water, which fish has no conception of anything other than water. We have no conception of anything, outside of time. Time ultimately doesn't exist, of course. One of the things I'd like to teach people in future videos, and it's really kind of hard to explain, is the Poincaré disk model of projective geometry. The one thing, and I'm not a new, and I have nothing at all. I mean, I embrace many parts of New Age, and New Age was coined by Walter Russell, was this holographic paradigm. And of all the things that I would, have an open mind, I do have an open mind. I would be ashamed of myself if I didn't. That is absolutely true. Is this projective holographic paradigm, and understanding Poincaré disk model of projective geometry, which is mathematical, but it's absolutely brilliant. And it's the reason why, if someone's held a ferrocell in their hand, and I made a ferrocell out of my blood, which I thought people would think would be fascinating, is that I created a magnetic holographic viewing device using my own blood, the nanoparticles in my own blood and the viewing device. As you're looking at something that is infinitely thinner than a human hair. But I mean, if you take the hologram on your credit card, for example, most people have never seen a true art hologram, and I have them. You can buy them. They're very beautiful. They're about 1,000 times more impressive than the hologram on your credit card. Well, this infinitely super thin, you take a half a drop of liquid, you smash it between two pieces of glass, and you're left with, 90% of it squishing out the sides, and you wipe it away. You see something that is 1,000 times better than a true art hologram, which itself is about 1,000 times better than the holography on a credit card. And you see this magneto-holographic projection that's absolutely phenomenal. And you understand the nature of magnetism, and then a lot of stuff becomes, explicitly clear. But I'm sorry, getting back to the ether, yes, this non-Cartesian pure potential, or the original definition of inertia, people say, well, where is the ether? Well, if it was aware, then it would be a Cartesian locus in space and time, and it wouldn't be the ether by definition. These things are ether modalities. There's no distinction between electricity, which is a hybrid, and Eric Dollar is exactly correct. And Charles Proteus Steinmetz, I believe on page 17 of Electrical Discharges, Waves, and Impulses, a man way more brilliant than Nikola Tesla, believe it or not. Even he said, and he published that book in 1915, he said all of the people involved in field theory of his day were completely confused. They completely confounded and conflated electricity. It's a compound, phi times psi equals q in Planck electrification. You could easily explain how electromagnet works if you understand that electricity is a hybrid between the dielectric and the magnetic. So, But all of these things are just ether. A field by definition is an ether perturbation modality. A child, of course, thinks ice is one thing, water is another, and steam is another, and human beings believe that about fields. But I mean, these scientists that I don't have much respect for, all of them I have seen, will fundamentally admit that there must be a GUT, a grand unified theory, where all these things are joined. Well, of course, they're already joined. It's that human beings have the incapacity to see the connectivity of them and what they are. Ice, water, and steam are, of course, just different expressions of temperature and pressure modalities of water, obviously. So electricity, gravity, magnetism, and dielectricity are just different modalities, obviously, of one and the same thing. The ether is manifest, like a bubble, if you will. Sorry, I droned on a little too much there.
No, that's beautiful.
Blame it on the caffeine. I'll shut up now.
So the ether is known as the quintessence, or the fifth element, because they say there are four elements: plasma, gas, liquid, and solid, which in the Neoplatonic terminology would be fire, air, water, and earth. But plasma being what they say most of the universe is plasma. Plasma would be directly coming from the ether, would it not?
Oh yes, well, so would the rest of these, though. I try not to talk too much about plasma, because then I'm always drawn into the vortex of the electric universe, folks. And I actually have a friendship with a couple of the EU people specifically. And he attacks Einstein endlessly. He's got a lot of YouTube videos. He's a brilliant, brilliant scientist. He nearly got his PhD, but he wouldn't accept the hierarchy of academia. His name is Stephen J. Carruthers. It talks about the absurdity of black holes and the asinine ludicrousness of Einstein's math, which is self-contradictory.
Yep.
Very, very brilliant guy. I think he's a Kiwi. You might know me. I think he is an Australian. I take that back. I apologize. Which I didn't know. I heard that you're an Australian also.
Yes.
Okay, I did not know that.
Yeah.
A
So
lot of people have asked me about you. It's like, well, I've talked to the guy once. Via phone, but I didn't know you, because everybody would ask, well, what about Santos? I said, I don't know the guy. I watched a couple of video references. He seems like a really nice, friendly, excuse the word, I was going to say cuddly there. I said that someone was just, and that's a positive. That's not a negative, because I don't look like a cuddly person. No one wants to give me a hug. It's like, who's that fat, ugly guy that looks like Uncle Fester?
You got some jokes, huh?
But people ask me about a lot of people. It's like, well, I don't know these people. I don't, get to travel or, mingle. I'm always very deep in books. I apologize once again. I interrupted you. Humble apologies.
You're fine, brother.
Sorry.
not at all. I'm enjoying it thoroughly. Now, I've heard you talk about the sun as a field perturbator. That field is the ether, right?
You mean our sun itself?
Yes, our sun.
Well, Eric Dollard has. I haven't spoken about it in the past few years in any video that I can make recollection to.
Okay, so he says it's a transformer from primary energy to secondary energy, which is what I just said before, from ether to plasma, or what we know as all the other elements, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I met Eric Dollard at the Science and Energy Conference. He's an interesting guy.
Oh, wow. I've learned so much from Eric as well about the sun. it's interesting what he says about the sun being cold, and the only arcing that occurs is in the ejections. Is that correct?
Oh, the coronal mass ejections, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, and
coronal
also
mass
too is borne out by these torsional sunspots, which of course are magnetic.
Course, or dielectric, wouldn't you say? Because they're black.
Yeah, but it's actually pushing away, the magnetic field is actually pushing away the light from there. They look black because the light's been greatly diminished in that particular region. So they look black, but they're not black. I mean, incredibly bright, but I mean, relative to the surrounding area, they come out black through the exposures that we give them of those particular regions. I used to be a ham radio operator and used to follow solar cycles and how the
Right.
propagation would change. But
So-
he's the expert on the sun. I do not proclaim to, done a tremendous amount of insight or brain crushing on the sun itself.
He is. He was good, and they smashed all of his laboratories. I don't know how many they destroyed on him, and eventually he was living in the Mojave Desert there, I think in California, in his car for a while. It was very, very sad that such a genius was just driven out of society, really, by the men in black.
I wish they would California too. I told them to move out east here, the south, and stuff like that wouldn't happen down here. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff in California, but as far as people bothering you and destroying your stuff, that generally doesn't happen here in the south. I mean, everything's got its positive and its negatives. I love California, but I don't mean to is personal to anybody, but I don't want to live there because kind of the way things are in California.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So Ken, with this enormous amount of evidence proving the existence of the ether, you spoke about how scientists and physicists in this day and age, if you can't quantify it, it must not exist, right?
Exactly.
But I mean, these aren't just, regular Joe Schmoes. These are intellects as well. Why haven't they found the evidence to show the existence of the ether? I mean, it's out there. The proof is there. What do you think is holding them back?
Well, they do admit to the ether now, but that is I'm trying to use a crude analogy here. That would be like a Satanist talking about Jesus, for example. The word, and I do mean that almost literally, it is truly an evil word. They replaced the word ether with dark matter, and by their own admission and their own words. These are not my words. These are their words. The reason why people say, what about dark matter? I hear about it all the time. In their own words, they call it dark matter dark because they don't know what it is, and they call it matter just like a hammer, everything's a nail. They think everything is matter, and that's why they call it dark matter. It has now also been called quantum foam. They love to refer to as quantum foam. They admit the ether 100% completely, but the ether truly, and some of them have written an article. We know we're talking about the ether, but we're just using euphemisms for the ether, but we can't use the word ether because nobody in academia would let us publish this because we ourselves are in academia. But if we use the word quantum foam, there's an article written exactly like this by an academician, I forget his name. But if we talk about quantum foam, then we could talk about the ether by using this euphemism.
Why do you think it's such taboo to use the word ether?
It's connected with Christianity and Neoplatonic Christianity. It's connected with metaphysics, and once again, it opens up
source
the truth. Correct. Absolutely. It's opening up a door that they don't want to open, and they completely always perpetually refuse.
It's Pandora's box.
Correct.
Once it's open, that's it. You can't.
Only ever been two foundations. Only ever. I've asked people, said, I dare you to contradict me. There has never ever been in history two foundations for ultimate reality ever been upon anything other than atomism and the ether. There's never been any other than these two.
Yep.
Never has been. And you can't explain instantaneous action at a distance, IAAD. You can't explain any of this stuff.
Can you tell our viewers? A little bit about that, please? About instantaneous action, please.
Instantaneous. Well, there's the sun Earth thought experiment, for example. There's only two things in the universe. One would immediately vanish. How could there be instantaneous action? There's also too the EPR paradox, which has been verified by all branches of science. We'll actually call it quantum tunneling. It's the reason why and how this instantaneous action at a distance exists is that there's quantum tunneling, which does not partake of space-time, and there is they call it spooky too, and Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. And the reason why it's spooky to them is, of course, it contradicts all of their atomism. It's completely spooky to them.
What they don't know, they call spooky. You know, what they
Yeah,
can't explain, they call spooky.
Either that or they euphemize it, admit to the ether, and call it quantum foam, or they call it dark matter. I mean, that is literally why, their own words, they call it dark matter. Is they don't know what it is. It's dark, therefore, and matter, because everything to them is matter.
Is physical, yeah.
Yep,
is some
exactly.
Ask any of these people to explain how light speeds back up after it leaves glass or leaves water. Of course, everybody on this earth suffers the idea that if something has a speed, then something's moving from point A to point B. And it's not. It's an ether perturbation modality. Just as Nikola Tesla himself said, and this is his exact quote, light can be nothing other than a sound wave in the ether. Of course, we all were brought up with Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier, but sound is not an emission. It's a perturbation, obviously, of nitrogen and oxygen. The speed of sound, if you will, or the rate of induction, i.e. the hysteresis of the air that we call the speed of sound, changes depending on how much humidity is in the air, how dense the air is, i.e. elevation, whether above sea level, below sea level. But it's not an emission. Light is not an emission either, yet we all suffer this delusion. And when you turn on a light switch, light is emitted. Well, nothing is emitted. You know, someone's in the middle of a pond flapping their arms, they're not emitting anything. They're creating a perturbation in the medium that they're in.
Sure.
Nothing is emitted.
Wow.
Exactly.
You can't explain the universe from Mother Nature. Mother Nature, and I've humorously said this, is kind of crude, is, you know, not a crazy chick on crack with a bag of bumping particles. The universe doesn't work that way. It's the ether. Explaining things simply is the ether. Explaining 10 million different bumping particles and, you know, quantum tunneling and virtual photons. Virtual photons is no different than talking about unicorns or leprechauns. There's no input or output of any experiment ever done, nor is there any logic behind it. It's conceptual abstraction with zero basis in reality by their own admission. They say these things don't exist, but we call them quantum, well, they call them actually two different things, virtual particles or virtual photons, or also call them virtual particles and virtual photons. There's a third one, I forget, excuse me.
Right. Even Thomas Young, the so-called discoverer of the electron, said it is not a particle.
J.J. Thomson called the electron
J.J. Thomson.
one unit of dielectric induction.
Exactly.
Amazing.
And people think I created this idea of dielectricity. It's like, no, those are the great geniuses of electrical theory, both, you know, Tesla, Steinmetz, Faraday, James Clerk Maxwell, Oliver Heaviside. These are the gods of field theory. They all said the same thing. I mean, it's not like some idea that I came up with.
Right. Eric Dollard too, as well. He was, he spoke a lot about dielectricity, didn't he?
And he also too accurately said that there's no way you can understand field theory without understanding the principle of counter space. We could call this subspace, zero space, non-Cartesian ultimate reality. I mean, science fiction's come up with a lot of different euphemisms for this, but I mean.
So you talk about it as incommensurable,
point non-specific incommensurability, like a magnet, for example. There is no North Pole or South Pole on a magnet. It doesn't exist. Everything is an emission from the plane of inertia. And it is not located there. It is a pressure mediation. I mean, if you were able to slice a magnet like a hunk of salami, each little slice would have a coordinate North Pole and a South Pole.
Yeah.
It's this dimensional S-curve that extrapolates out what magnetism is, which is, Faraday said, magnetism is a dielectric field. It's like saying ice is the cold field of water, for example, to speak of magnetism in relationship to dielectricity. And electricity is a compound of these two. And also too, like I said, explaining an electromagnet, how it works, scientists will give you a YouTube video on how an electromagnet works, and they make it overtly complicated. But if you understand what electricity is by losing and dumping its dielectric component in counter space, the only thing that's left is the magnetic field. This is how an electromagnet becomes, you know, those electromagnets that lift up giant cars out in the jungle, for example. Explaining it becomes abundantly easy. And this is exactly what Charles Proteus Steinmetz, who was I think he was an achondroplegic dwarf. You know, he was bent at the hip, and he smoked giant cigars and hung out with Thomas Edison, working on a phone booth to dial the future in the past. I've actually got pictures of that. You know, a very, very brilliant person. He perfected Nikola Tesla's AC generator with laminated steel and other patents, and he holds more patents than Nikola Tesla does. Very, very brilliant person. Yeah, no, everyone's heard of Tesla, but no one's heard of James Clerk Maxwell. Sorry, Steinmetz, excuse me. I was about to say Charles Proteus Steinmetz. Humble apologies.
Steinmetz.
Speaking of the poles, I was very curious about hearing your opinion on natural phenomenon. For example, why all compasses point north. About the aurora borealis, for example, northern lights. What that might be, really. Not what they tell us it is, but what that really might be. Thoughts on that?
I mean, like the toroidal portals on either, the toroidal portals where the actual charged particles actually enter in up at the north and up at the south.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. The toroidal there'd be these toroidal vortexes that spiral in, and also too explaining. Well, I don't get into that. I was talking about geomagnetic precessional torque and other stuff, and explaining, pole flipping in relationship to a gyroscope. Anybody that's played with a gyroscope for more than an hour explaining it becomes abundantly simple. Even Einstein himself, as a broken clock is right twice a day. Einstein accurately said, if you can't explain it to a barmaid in simple terms, then you yourself don't really understand it. So he was right on that. He was right on that one. This is true. I mean, if you can't explain it to a 12-year-old, you yourself don't understand it.
Yeah.
Mother Nature is just force and motion, inertia and acceleration. Everything's either capacitance, resistance, magnetic permeability, or dielectric permittivity. I actually grew up with superconductor sets, which are yttrium, barium, copper oxide discs, and magnets. And I think my Christmas gift that I asked for as a teenager was a Dewar flask, and I was playing around with liquid nitrogen. And so I knew this notion of superconductivity was absolutely ludicrous. It's not superconductivity, it's near zero magnetic permeability. It's like, well, Mother Nature once again becomes irrational. We have this idea of something that's different. Well, over here we have superconductivity, over here we have gravity. Well, it's ludicrous. There's no such thing as magnetic attraction. I finally figured that out. I can honestly say that I figured that out on my own with no help from Walter Russell or Eric Dollard or even Nikola Tesla. It's like, well, this is abundantly clear now as this all comes into abundant simplicity. There's no distinction between so-called gravity and so-called magnetic attraction. These are, of course, just distinctions with a difference in attribution, like a light bulb and a laser. I keep telling people, I said, what's the difference between a 5-watt light bulb and a 5-watt laser? 5-watt light bulb is nearly useless. You wouldn't even want to read a book by it, but a 5-watt laser, and I have a 5-watt laser right over here. It's insanely dangerous. It'll burn a hole in your butt, and it'll burn the back of your eye permanently and blind you for the rest of your life. Well, what's the difference? 5 watts is 5 watts. Well, the difference is in attribution. One is point source, and the other one is non-point source. So we have this distinction of field incommensurability, where things not only become additive in the case of a magnet, but they become multiplicative. I keep telling people that there's not a single scientist on the earth, if you put them on the spot, excuse me, sir, here's $1 million. All you have to do is explain what a magnet is. Well, a magnet is not quantitative, it's qualitative. Before a magnet becomes a magnet, it's quantitatively identical. And this is not my opinion, this is an undeniable fact. It is 100% quantitatively identical before it becomes a magnet as it is after. So if it's quantitatively identical before and after, then it must be therefore what defines a magnet must be qualitative. So what is the qualitative nature that therefore defines the term and the denotation of the term magnet? And that is that field incommensurability, where things become multiplicative, and then the field then therefore becomes ab extra to itself. And the only way you can explain that, of course, is with the ether. You can't explain it with, these unreal abstractions like unicorns and leprechauns, which is exactly what they say, except instead of saying unicorns and leprechauns, I say, well, virtual particles. And you can look this up on a Wikipedia page, and that's in reference to Leonard Susskind, the great geniuses of quantum. What a magnet is emitting is virtual photon. They say this. This isn't, some idea that I have. And everybody should do a YouTube search, and it's it's like a 5.5-minute video. The genius of field theory and quantum, who was Richard Feynman, was a British interviewer, asks him, he said, what is this thing going on around a magnet? And he would have been smart if he said, I really don't know. I've given a lot of thoughts. Well, that would have been smart. I don't know. I keep telling people no one's ever gone looking for the answers to things that they think they already know the answer to. So anyway, he talks about an old woman slipping on the ice, and he wiggles and squirms in his chair like a frog on a hot plate. And he basically insults the guy who's honestly asking a question. And to see what, it's just too complicated for me to explain to you. Oh man, that's just ludicrous. It's ridiculous.
Oh, wow.
The reason why this guy was actually so loved, and there's a lot of videos of him online, is that the college kids thought he was the coolest thing since sliced bread. He'd show up at an interview smoking a big cigarette and a bottle of bourbon in the other hand, and kick his legs back. And he was like, man, yeah, read, all right. I'm going to drink some bourbon and smoke some cigarettes and explain quantum to you. And all the college kids just thought, man, this guy's cool. My college professor drinks bourbon and smokes cigarettes, and he wears fine suits. And he was smart. He was intelligent. I have his books, but that 5-minute video, of which there are probably 600 copies of on YouTube, is extremely telling. Anybody, that wants to know how these people think and what they truly understand should watch that video.
Wow.
Sorry if that's too tangential. It's a great watch. It's only 5 minutes long. Type in Google search or YouTube search, type in Feynman explains magnetism.
Or avoids explaining magnetism because he can't. You can only define it. As you say, definitions are not explanations.
Yeah, but if he said, I don't know, I would really...
That would have been, of course.
That would have been a smart answer, actually.
Of course.
Right. So what you were saying before about coherent light laser is multiplicative. So what's going on with...
Coherence only attributional. What actually defines a laser is that it's a point source emission. And we actually had holography, which most people find fascinating. We had holography, the creation of holograms, before lasers existed. And the way we were able to do that was using a slit lamp and mercury light emissions. So then we only have to have point source emissions, because lasers don't come out as this thin beam of light, which a lot of people think. They actually have lenses that focus them into this column or beam, but a laser is actually a point source type of light rather than and it is coherent light. Whatever. So, laser is light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. What defines a laser is coherent light radiation. It's like, well, that's correct, but it's still less than a third of what light is. I didn't mean to interrupt you on that one. I actually had the train of thought in my head when you mentioned coherent light.
You're fine.
So you're saying point source is different to coherent light, right? Point source.
No, not different. The coherency doesn't actually explain what the laser is. It is accurate in that that's the attributional nature of laser emission, whether it be LED. This is also too the reason why LED lights are so bad for your eyes. And no one has ever said, well, why are LED lights? And this has been proven over and over again. Just regular incandescent light bulb versus LED lights. I mean, it makes your eyes hurt, and it's bad for your eyes. It's not to damage your eyes. It's because LED lights are like quasi lasers. They are point source. And this is the reason why 99.9%, nearly 100% today of lasers are LED lasers. Is that LED light is quasi point source light, and it's damaging. It's completely unnatural vis-a-vis Mother Nature. But of course, they're extremely energy efficient. They don't suck much power. So there's a million reasons to love them, but there's also too many valid reasons to hate them because they're not good for your eyes.
Wow. Okay, so point source is something I'm going to have to look into a little bit more.
It's incredible
to understand the multiplicative nature of laser light is what fascinates me. How you can burn holes through things. How you can use laser technology and Saser. I guess you could call it sound and light, sonoluminescence, but the multiplicative nature of that coherent, I guess, beam. I think you once described it as all the so-called magnets or atoms are all aligned. And so that's what makes them multiplicative. Rather than being incoherent like white light and not aligned, they are all aligned. And that gives it a multiplicative power, right?
Because metaphysics and physics are not two different things. They're one thing, kind of like the head and tail of a coin. When people say, what is liberation? What is transcendence by definition? I talk about taking up attributionally what one is not. You take white light and shine it on a red wall, the red light will come back to you, right? White light upon a blue wall. And of course we say, well, this is incoherent light. Well, it is non-point source light. It takes up attributionally anything that it comes in contact with. Yes, this is the case. Well, as a red laser on a blue wall, you'll still see a red dot, right? A red laser upon any color, it still remains what it is inherently. It does not take upon itself the attribution of any phenomena that it were to come in contact with. And of course, I use the radio analogy. So what is transcendence? I said, well, how could you And of course, a ham radio operator built radios and fixed radios, and of course, deeply interested in field theory. How do you tune in a signal with no modulation? It's completely impossible. The broadcast is synonymous with consciousness. The radio, of course, if you take, and I have many radios that are absolutely identical, they will take the exact same signal and tune it differently. So we actually have individuation through the radio. This is the consubstantiality of matter and spirit. And it's a near perfect analogy. It can't be taken too far, but I mean, there's no distinction between metaphysics and physics. I mean, fundamentally, I'm a metaphysician and a perennialist interested in ultimate truth, but you find parallels on both sides, and they must be one holos, as the Greeks would call it, one true whole. They're not two different branches of science. I mean, no Aristotelian, Platonic, Neoplatonic, or Pythagorean
Yes.
with, over here we have science, and over here we have metaphysics. It was completely ridiculous. You study one to understand the other, and you understand this one, you understand that one.
Sure.
But this identification phenomenology of taking upon identity of that which you are not, the most repeated phrase in ancient Pali, the original Buddhist scriptures, and by original, I really emphasize the word original, is Isakaya Namisata. The body or the psychophysical is not the soul. Namarupa Anatati. The psychophysical is not the soul. This false identification, this neti, this via negativa of disobjectification, theurgy, transcendence, and disobjectification are all one and the same thing, or just nothing is known except in the modality of the knower. The Indians and the Greeks were saying the same thing. All of these Indian metaphysicians, the famous ones like Sarvapati Radhakrishnan, Ananda Kichish Kumaraswamy, on and on and on, were so interested in what the Greeks had to say because it was just a different take on the exact same thing. Nothing is known except in the modality of the knower. This false identity of seeing self in what is not self. And it's the same thing as gold purification. Of course, there's no such thing as gold being purified. It is extracted from whatever it is dispersed in. Gold, of course, is gold by definition. So when we talk about, purification or transcendence, there seems to be in the minds of many lay people this notion that, if what is truly pure is pure by definition, then how is it that I need to do anything at all? I mean, would it not be natural? And we're talking about delusion through false identity. Both the Greeks and the Indians, of course, talked about avidya, or the primordial condition, the uncaused cause of attribution. Now, of course, would be the euristos dias, the Greek called it tolma randankia, this. And in the case of physics, it would be light and illumination. There's no distinction between light and illumination. Illumination, of course, is the extrinsic attribute of light. There's no such thing as illumination. We speak of illumination as that which light does, as the
Sure.
Christian Platonists would talk about the good, what the good is, and what the good does, both being one and the same thing. And this, of course, is too the reason why the first two numbers of the Fibonacci sequence are 1 and 1, principle and attribute. Sorry, I went too far down that,
No, no,
down that line.
Blowing my mind.
Oh, that was beautiful. So we've got principle and attribute. So principle in this case is light and illumination is attribute.
Yeah, and avidya. Of course, we're talking about not conventional or corporeal ignorance. We're talking about transcendence, not ignorance. And if you actually take the word avidya, whether it be Pali or Sanskrit, or agnosis in the Greek, all these three words, if you think about it, or start out with a, meaning privative, opposite to or directed away from gnosis. Avidya literally means the absence of or away from light. And of course, that is what illumination is. Illumination is the attribute of light itself, which is directed away from itself, this uncaused cause, this primordial condition, which of course must be transcended through the elimination thereof, where no further false identity can be enjoined. True extraction of gold, of course, is no gold is purified. And using that gold analogy, in ancient metaphysicians love to talk about gold in relationship to the soul. Gold is never purified as extracted, obviously, and purified in the sense that it is made more and more concentrate, where you only have ultimately gold.
Right. By eliminating what is not gold.
This neti, obviously the self is never an object to be witnessed, nor can it be. I mean, the only means of this disobjectification methodology is objective negation. And we can't, of course, get there by thinking our way out of a thinking box. I mean, obviously, I would never infer that, nor did any ancient metaphysician. It is, a transcendental methodology, obviously, so we can't, people try to think and think harder, and they're burning the wood between their ears. It's like you're trying to escape a thinking box by thinking, and that obviously can't be done. So it really, really confuses them when you actually talk about this objectification. The original word of meditation, and in the case of Japanese is Zen, and Chinese is Channa, and Sanskrit it's Jhana, and Pali the word is Jhana, and the root word for Jhana is Jati. It means to burn. What you're doing is you're burning away all objectivity, leaving pure subjectivity. Just neti. The Greeks called it apophatism, the via negativa, and the Pali, of course, it's anatta. And I've been debating these Buddhists for so long, not that I'm trying to get on a tangent of talking about Buddhism. I said, well, if Buddhism is logical consistent, we could both agree with that, even the people that I disagree with. So yes, it is logical consistent. So you would not need to say, this is not the soul, that's not the, you would just say, followers, there is no soul. Boom, end of story. But there is no such passage. This anatta term is a via negativa method. Rupa nata, veda nata, sankara nata, vinya nata, isabekave, namarupa anatati. The followers, the psychophysical is not the soul. These 22 things are not the soul. I mean, why would you even point that out if there was no soul, obviously? So, Suvimuta Chatasana Bhanam, of course, the most paraphrasable core of original Buddhism. And Buddhism is no different than Advaita Vedanta or any other form of transcendental metaphysics. Suvimuta Chatasana Bhanam means, nirvana means the thoroughly liberated chitta. And this word in Greek is nous, in English or Latin, it would be spiritus sanctum. This is the axis mundi of the one noun that is vimukta from false identity. What you're removing, of course, is the primordial attribute of, seeing self and what is not self. Why does a woman cry at a sad movie? Well, she's not in the movie. She's not connected to the movie. She didn't pay for the movie to be made. So why does anybody, suffer over that which they are not inherently connected to?
Sure.
Metaphysics and monistic metaphysics vis-a-vis the Greeks and Indians doesn't have to be that fundamentally hard, but all these, these countless guru over the millennia have complicated it, and you have to pay, and you have to, it's fundamentally simple. It's ironic that you have to go through all of this to see how fundamentally simple it is. Obviously, doing the methodology itself is not simple, but anyway, I digress. I apologize.
So by studying or describing attributes, they are hiding the principles, and the main principle is ether, right?
Correct.
Why would they be doing that?
If it was, yeah.
Oh, you mean the atomists or
Yes.
The relativists?
Yeah, the quantum physicists, isn't it?
Well, everything is built upon atomism. You must fundamentally deny the ether. I mean, even early on, I'm trying to remember the exact quote from Einstein. He admitted many, many times over, the ether, but it cannot fit into his. He actually reified space and time as being thing. The one thing I can tell you with 100% certainty, of course, Nikola Tesla, had a pet pigeon. He was super gentle, and he's from all accounts, from all people, he's the most gentle soul on earth. So the one time he comes closest to foaming at the mouth was talking about the notion of space. Space does not exist. Space has no properties, as Nikola Tesla famously said. It's this, it's a phantasm. And of course, that space is the after effect of a divergent magnetic field. Space does not exist at all. And I mean that literally. Nikola Tesla himself said that. And of course, all of relativity is based upon the reification of space and time. Time doesn't exist either. Every ancient culture, everyone, and this is the reason why 4 is such a bad word, an ominous word in Chinese, Japanese, means death. Every ancient culture said time is the number 4, and the only number missing in the Fibonacci sequence, the first 5 digits, is the number 4, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. Time doesn't exist. It is a measure of magnitudes.
Wow.
There's a neat little book that you could download, and I digitized all the works of Dr. Ananda Kishish Kumaraswamy. It's a brilliant book called Time and Eternity, where you could read about every ancient culture's explanation of time. And I don't mean like Joe Schmo's explanation. I mean the real wise, brilliant masters of metaphysics. And they all agree time does not exist. It is a measure. It's not a thing itself. Space has no properties. So we're talking about unicorns and leprechauns that relativity has reified. When you remove the ether, you have to create this other construct upon which the foundation of relativity must be based, and it's based upon space-time, curved space-time. Well, you can't curve space-time, and it's ridiculous. I don't want to make a crude analogy. I've kind of humorously said it's analogous to bending. Well, I don't want to say that. It's kind of a funny funny little thing that makes people remember stuff. You know, you're talking about bending things that don't exist, like bending unicorn horns or something. There's no curved space-time. Time is a measure and space doesn't exist. Space has no properties. Nikola Tesla himself said this over and over and over again. He said that it cannot act upon anything because it has no properties whereby which or through which it can act upon it. It's like a notion of emptiness. Emptiness is not a thing. It's a qualifier of something else. Something is shunya or empty of something else. Space has no properties.
I've got a quote from Tesla that someone said to me is not really his. I wonder whether I'll read a portion of it and
You
whether
confirm or deny
you can
it, yeah.
confirm that it is or not. Where he says, only the existence of a field or force can account for the motions of the bodies as observed, and its assumption dispenses with space curvature. All literature on this subject is futile and destined to oblivion.
Correct. Accurate quote.
Yep. So are all attempts to explain the workings of the universe without recognizing the existence of the ether and the indispensable function it plays in the phenomena. So I have someone, I won't mention his name. It's a guy, well.
Yeah, don't mention his name at all.
He's got a YouTube channel and
Yes. Yeah.
he one
It's
of
not
his
worth
things
it.
is the ether doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's been proven that it doesn't exist. And I read this to him and he says,
Well, he's a nuclear physicist, so
he
Yeah.
is a-
yeah. So
yeah. And he said that Nikola Tesla did not write this. So
He did.
he did.
yeah.
I've seen more than a few fake Nikola Tesla quotes, but that's not one of them. Here's another one from Nikola Tesla about Einstein. Einstein is a beggar dressed in the purple robes and made a king using dazzling mathematics that obscure the truth. Here's another one from Tesla. The theory of relativity is a mass of error and deception, i.e. these ideas violently opposed to the teachings of great men of science of the past and even to common sense. He wrote a poem. It's called Fragments of Olympian Gossip. He loved dinner parties, being invited to rich folks' dinner parties. And part of his poem from Nikola Tesla, given in his own voice to the dinner parties. This is a fragment of it. Too bad, Sir Isaac, they dimmed your renown, meaning Isaac Newton. They dimmed your renown and turned your great science upside down. Now a long-haired crank, Einstein by name, puts on your high teachings all to blame. He says matter and force are transmutable and wrong the laws you thought were immutable. I am much too ignorant, my son, for grasping schemes so finely spun.
Wow.
Wow. Who was that again?
That was Nikola Tesla reading his poem to a dinner party of rich folks that he was invited to. He loved going to rich dinner parties. The poem is called Fragments of Olympian Gossip by Nikola Tesla, written about Einstein. Here is Nikola Tesla again. My conclusions differ from Einstein and to that extent tend to disprove Einstein's theory. My explanations of natural phenomena are not so involved. He's really, really nice. Not so involved as his. They are simpler, and when ready to make a full announcement, it will seem that I have proven my conclusions. Relativity is a beggar, Tesla says, wrapped in purple robes who ignorant people take for a king. The theory, he says, of Einstein wraps all these errors and fallacies and clothes them in magnificent mathematical garb, which fascinates, dazzles, and makes people blind to underlying errors. This theory is like a beggar clothed in the purple, meaning purple nobility, for whom ignorant people take for a king.
Wow.
Oh, also to say in the presence of large bodies, space becomes curved and is equivalent to stating that something can act upon nothing. I, for one, refuse to subscribe to such a view, Nikola Tesla says regarding space reification vis-a-vis relativity and that of Einstein. And lastly, last quote from Tesla regarding scientists of his time, which have become corrupted as well in reference to Einstein. Today's scientists have substituted mathematics for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation, eventually building a structure which has no relationship to reality. The scientists of today think deeply instead of clearly. One must be sane to think clearly, but one can think deeply and be quite insane.
Yep, I've used
It's
that
true.
quote.
There's another quote
Wow.
from someone else that said that insane asylums are actually full of very, very brilliant, intelligent people, but they're in insane asylums for a reason.
Wow.
This
Yep.
is true. I know a person that ended up in an insane asylum, and he was one of the most brilliant, intelligent people ever, but he was quite literally insane.
Right. Who was that?
Oh, I don't want to give his name. It's a person I knew. He's very, very brilliant, but he's one of those people that can't see the forest for the trees.
Right.
They have all the math in front of them, and they have their PhDs hanging on the wall, and I have nothing against that. But I mean, they can't think sanely. These
Yeah.
people reify space and time, which have no reality. Time is not a thing, and space has no properties. And they build a structure of atomism which can't explain Mother Nature. Either that, or it's a completely fantastical ridiculousness, which violates Occam's razor of simplicity. Mother Nature, as I've humorously said, as a dreadlock wearing chick with muddy feet and a hemp skirt, she doesn't have a calculator. The only thing she deals with is pressure mediation and force of motion, inertia, and acceleration. She doesn't deal with magic particles and space reification. It's completely impossible. It's contrary to logic, common sense, and it's completely contrary to Occam's razor of simplicity, for which Mother
Dixie-
Nature must be divinely simple. We can't complicate Mother Nature and make her out to be a crazy chick with a PhD and bifocals and a calculator. It's
Of
ridiculous.
course. Yeah.
Pixie farts and fairy dust and unicorns. Is what you say.
Just to make people laugh, I say that. But
Well, you get me rolling around in the room laughing every time.
you gotta throw some sort of humorous stuff on there, otherwise it doesn't catch people's attention.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, Ken, with your magnetic viewing film, you're obviously showing that the field is there, which is the ether. You are showing how the hyperbola, the white light, is radiating and divergent centrifugal light, and the black light in your viewing film is converging centripetal. And so, as Walter Russell would have put it, radiation and gravitation. So that's coming from and going back to the ether, correct?
Yeah, the plane of inertia thereof, which is the lowest pressure mediation that exists between the geometries of the toroid and the hyperboloid, respectively, the magnetic and the dielectric. As we always see this bright line, whether it be under the magnetic viewing film or whether it be underneath the ferrocell. Of course, we're looking at constructive and destructive interference. Also, too, where you see the crosshatch between constructive and destructive, we actually see, if you look really close, little pinpoints of light, and you're actually looking at an electrical circuit of light coming out into your eyes, rather than just the regular bright lines. They're actually bright little points where they actually intersect. So we actually have something different than constructive and destructive interference. But
Right. The black
it's
light
the
and the
conjugate
white.
geometry of the universe, just like the yin and the yang. I mean, that is the conjugate geometry of the universe, and everything we see from macro to micro.
Okay, so is this sound first or light first? What is it? The black and the white light that we see in your ferrocell vids. What is this? Sound, sonoluminescence, sound and light, or just light?
Just light in that case. Where we actually see blackness, we're actually seeing the dielectric. And where we see light, we're actually seeing constructive magnetic. Where we see black, we're seeing constructive dielectric. And of course, there's a reason why we actually see this black portal, if you will. Everybody says, oh, it looks like of course no one's seen a black hole, obviously, but this science fiction thing that they have in their head from watching all these science fiction is like, oh, this looks like a black hole, and it does look like a vortex dip, and it is a vortex dip towards the plane of inertia, towards counter space, which exists.
And the plane of inertia is something else that needs to be spoken about when you talk about the reciprocating positional hyperboloid torus fields. You have to understand the plane of inertia. I heard you once say in the video that is the only place where matter can exist. Is that correct?
Also, too, where most life exists. I mean, actually, I recently made a video about the plane of inertia. Discussing that one's not so easy. The idea in my head is blatantly easy, but explaining it is not so easy. But the plane of inertia is that low pressure point, the rest point, kind of like the eye of a hurricane, where everything, and I've been in a couple of hurricanes, and it's like, wow, everything's calm, and you go outside, and, you just got done blowing around, you think you're going to die, and you look up and the sky is blue and everything is peaceful and calm. and you have this temperate zone where life and birth and everything, comes to be born, just like the vortex of our navel. I mean, everything in life that we experience and that we're born out of is, some vortex, opening or chasm that we either experience life through, or feed ourselves, or are born or procreate through. So we have this null pressure point between the vortex ends, if you will. And by using ends, and we're talking about polarity, a magnet doesn't actually have poles, it has the inverse of counter space, the inverse of the dielectric. This manifests this holographic paradigm, this toroidal projection, which is wholly unreal because the magnetic is unreal. And I could actually get, and that's even far more difficult to talk about, the Poincare disk model of projective geometry, which Henri Poincaré came up with, and it's extremely brilliant, and it actually explains ultimate reality, but he did not know that at the time. And of course, that's the same person that Einstein stole much of his stuff from, Henri Poincaré. Talking about the Poincare disk model of projective geometry, people can find some really neat diagrams of that, where you actually have the plane of inertia manifesting this false, unreal, holographic, field around itself. And of course, that's what magnetism is, the dielectric field. If you actually think about energy or inertia in relationship to the dielectric, I was trying to make a simple analogy that people think power is an atomic explosion. No, I mean, an atomic explosion, of course, is the impotency of power. Power, would, of course, would be that softball-sized lump of fissionable uranium or plutonium. We actually have pure potential. Of course, that is Cartesian. It has a lump, it has mass, and so on and so forth. But inertia in counter space is pure. And Walter Russell explains this far more brilliantly than I ever could. And he was a brilliant expositor upon this fact, where we actually have energy is manifesting, this dimensional projection. And that is necessitatively, and the Greeks had this brilliant word, ananke. It roughly translates as necessity, but what it really means, that word is, and I've got a book over there, it's 352 pages trying to explain one ancient Greek word, or the word ananke. What it actually means is it can't exist any other way. So how, by the attributional nature of the dielectric, or to the agathon in Greek, or the ether, do we actually explain that loss of that energy or inertia? How can it necessitatively manifest? And it manifests through that three-dimensional projective form away from the plane of inertia, which is the rest point between the magnetic and the dielectric. And of course, that was my discovery, and it's the reason why I have it tattooed here on the inside of my right wrist, 1/5 to the power of -3, which is an expression. And I could exposit on that for many countless hours and bore everybody to the death of pointing and wanting to commit suicide. I would bore people to death talking about it for 5 or 6 hours. But
oh, gee, that's funny.
Oh.
So great, and you do a lot. I laugh when you say if photons existed as particles, you'd have to wipe them from your camera at the end of the day, because you're into photography as well.
Yeah, you have to shake them out of your camera. I asked two people to understand, or try to explain to themselves, think about it. Why is it the higher the power of the light, the smaller the space? And that, of course, is a brilliant expositor of not only the ether, but also, too, of counter space. This is the reason why gamma radiation is so dangerous. Gamma radiation is just nothing other than high energy light. I made a prediction several years ago, and it's one thing I wrestled with, and it was so blatantly simple. I mean, I should have even told myself, because I knew better, because Mother Nature is so simple. The reconciliation, that's been a problem too for eons, many thousands of years, is that you can reduce a lot of stuff in nature very simply, but then you're left with this problem, and it's not really a problem. Over here you have light, and over here you have matter, and since everything is connected, how do you reconcile these two things as one thing? And I kind of humorously called it hard lights. And I just kind of had a philosophical revelation about 2 years ago, and I made a video about it. I said that fundamental particle, all scientists, by the way, admit that a free neutron after 17 minutes becomes a proton. Well, that's the case. Well, electrons have already been dismissed. Nikola Tesla, Dollard, Heaviside, and the rest of these people said there's no such thing as a charge-carrying particle. There's no such thing as an electron. That's a conceptual abstraction. Electron, of course, is just one unit of dielectric conduction. So we've eliminated out the electron. All free neutrons become protons. So a neutron is obviously, therefore, an abstraction of a proton. So there's only one fundamental particle. Then, therefore, once again, how do you reconcile light and matter? And I kind of said humorously that it's hard lights. And recently, and I've got a few links to it, where scientists use magnetic fields and ultra high energy lasers, and they were actually able to produce matter from super high energy light. Of course, we see these galactic jets emitting trillions and trillions of tons of hydrogen. So reconciliation of light and matter is not a reconciliation. So several magnitudes above that of gamma radiation, we actually have the fundamental building block of matter, which is just super high energy light. I ask people too, you know, and of course this explains and backs up the ether. It doesn't back up atomism. Why is it that the higher the capacitance, the smaller the space? Gamma radiation, for example, is something to the order of, I don't know how many millions of times smaller and volume than that of infrared light, for example. I mean, infrared light, I mean, we could sit there and bathe underneath it for, you know, nearly forever and not be injured, but gamma radiation is going to immediately break apart our DNA and, you know, very, very quickly kill us. And yet its volume is infinitely less than that of infrared. I said, well, explain to yourself, why is it Mother Nature is opposite to how human thinks? Mother Nature's box, if you will, the smaller the space, the higher the capacitance. We have this idea that a larger box can hold more stuff, but in Mother Nature's field, the smaller the space, the higher the capacitance. And the reason for that is that capacitance comes from counter space. It is opposite to how human beings think. Well, a smaller box holds less, therefore, if it holds less, it's less powerful. No, it's completely, well, that's true in human ideation, but Mother Nature's capacitance is exactly the opposite. And the reason for that is that the smaller the space, the higher the capacitance. Anything that is spatial, by definition, is therefore magnetic, and it has less potency, because magnetism is the manifestation of the loss of that energy or inertia, i.e. The ether. Sorry if I bored you to death. I droned on too far on that.
No, that's beautiful. Music to my ears. So I've got so many things though. I want to go back to things that you've said. For instance, so the neutron would, in a simple model of an atom, would a neutron be the plane of inertia?
In the case of an atom?
Yeah.
Well, like we're talking about hydrogen, where we just have one proton and one assumed electron, which is not an electron at all. I mean, any atom is just an electrostatic dynamo. I mean, every scientist is accurate when they will tell you, and you're probably taught this in school like I was, is that every atom is 99.99999% empty space. It's like a super giant beach ball the size of the earth, and you know the nucleus is like a softball somewhere at the middle. It's like, well, what's making up the volume of every atom in picometers? I mean, it's just an electrostatic dynamo. But the plane of inertia in that case would be, you know, the nexus between, well, in the case of hydrogen, we only actually have one particle.
Right.
I don't actually ever deny that particles exist. Actually attacking, and I've told people this endlessly, I said attacking, and say, well, I'll say, what about atoms? I said, well, attacking atomism is an attack on the principle, the fundamental philosophy behind atomism. It's not an attack, you know, saying that, you know, the particles don't exist. They do. But ultimately they're reconciled as nothing other than ultra high energy constructs of light. And of course, every scientist will also too fundamentally agree that every element is just a multiplicative compound of hydrogen. I mean, they will all admit that. I mean, helium is a compounded version of hydrogen, and so is every other element. So getting down to irreducible simplicity, you know, matter is just nothing other than ultra high energy light. There's no need to reconcile light and matter. I mean, Mother Nature, if she could scream at us, would say, you know, you stupid, fat, tattooed, bald monkey, you don't have to reconcile light and matter, because matter is light. It's just super high energy light, way above that of gamma radiation. And recently that's been proven.
So most people would say that physical bodies are low vibrating light rather than high vibrating light, wouldn't they?
In relationship to the animus, because of course we have a matter body, but I mean, this radio of ours is being animated by a different principle that is ab extra to, is consubstantial. The signal is consubstantial to this corporeal body. Obviously we have the spirit and the soul, just as the signal is not the broadcast. If we tune in like radio frequency 88.9, we think we're listening to the signal. We're not. We're listening to the broadcast. The broadcast is an interpolation from the radio and the circuits and the high band pass filters, just like the radio in your car. You could take any signal and change the bass and change the treble, change, you know, this and that, and make it sound radically different. So that's not the signal. That's the broadcast. That's the consubstantiality, of course, of the radio and its transistors and whatnot. And that would be the same thing of this physical body and the empirical consciousness. You know, there's no purification of the physical consciousness from any branch of metaphysics. It is consubstantial to this body. It means it goes no further than that, just as the broadcast can't go any further than the radio.
Yep.
Because it has a beginning in time, and as every branch of metaphysics says, something has a beginning in time, has an end in time. You can't purify it, you can't polish the turd. And I keep pointing that out to people. You're trying to polish something that fundamentally cannot be polished.
Right.
And of course, you have to give definition to what liberation or transcendence is by definition. This disobjectification, you know, if identifying as the radio, like when you brush your teeth in the morning, like I do, that is not who I am. Yisakaya Namisata.
Right. So with the viewing film, we see light. We see the black with the white light. One is magnetic, one is dielectric. What component of sound? How is it? Is there any way of measuring or the sound? Obviously, you can't hear it, but is anyone doing this? Is anyone discovering the sound component of magnetism? Or
Yeah, that would be, we could talk about the sonoluminescence of light, depending, of course, the frequency and the amplitude. That would be the geomagnetic precessional frequency, also called the Lamore frequency. The median Lamore frequency is 52.4 megahertz, million cycles. And so, yes, and there lies a whole other universe of secrets and of light that I will not even feign to have said that I've spent an enormous amount of time crushing my brain over. But yeah, I know what you're referring to, and goodness knows what wonderful windows that actually opens up for our understanding of this universe, and also too of, you know, bettering humanity or bettering our connection with other people and so on and so forth.
For sure. I saw your quote unquote anti-gravity device that you built, and it was working. I could see that it was slightly working, but you suggested there that the way to manipulate anything in matter is to be able to manipulate the electromagnetic retardation or electromagnetic precession of the toroidal field. Is that correct?
Not in relationship to that particular device. That's actually uses two quadrupolar magnets, a pancake coil, a watch battery, and a copper reflector. It actually feels like you're, I'm trying to think, like you're holding something, and you see you have a really fluffy blanket, which is easy to push down. For example, you're holding something in your hand and you're slightly dropping it against a very compressible, fluffy blanket. I mean, there's not much power there. I actually got that idea from a guy who used to work for Skunk Works, building black projects. And I thought along those lines. I've built 3 prototypes. One of them I give to my dad. He plays with it all the time. The little toy. Little toy. I only have a few more of those quadrupolar magnets left, but it is fun to play with. But no, in relationship to EMR, electromagnetic retardation, that was in reference to GPS satellite correction, for example, which I've been asked about a lot. So, well, this proves warp space-time because we actually have correction of that. But no, not on electromagnetic retardation, not in relationship to that particular, or to any, that little prototype. I didn't make any connection there.
Right. So have you gone any further along that line of electromagnetic retardation and how you can use that to manipulate, I guess, matter?
Only in thought experiments, and also to researching the stuff of Dr. Oleg Jefamenko. Is the only guy that I know that he secretly, because he was academician, 2 PhDs, highly regarded, but he had to be really careful about attacking Einstein. But he attacks Einstein. You know how the British are very, very good at insulting the hell out of you so skillfully that you almost think that they complimented you, but they didn't compliment you. They just totally tore you apart. And he was really, I wished he was still alive, really, really good at that. No, other than researching his works and having thought experiments on that, I have not. But
right.
He heinously attacks Einstein, just heinously, but he does it so skillfully that he escapes the ire of his other fellow. Of course, he's not alive anymore, but escapes the ire of his other academicians.
Yep.
Consider Einstein a cult head. I mean, he's like, going to the Catholic Church and, slandering Mary Mother. Mary Mother. It's just you don't do that. It's not possible.
That's right.
Saint Einstein is a couple of books called him.
Yep.
Just how he's treated.
Yep. Absolutely, a cult hero, and is deceived many people. Unfortunately.
Pardon me that? I'm sorry.
He's deceived many people, unfortunately, so led them along the wrong path, and many have now no knowledge at all of the ether, which is, to me, it's just insanity, absolute insanity, because you're denying half of reality. You're denying the causal half, really, aren't you?
You are, and also too that, like I said, that opens up doors, but it opens up good doors. But it opens up if you're kind of fundamentally evil by nature, and I don't mean explicitly evil, but evil in mind, that it opens up a reality you do not want to admit to. But look at humanity. I mean, we're de-evolving. I tell people, as a former ham radio operator, I can call it myself at least an expert on field theory. That if people had even the slightest hint, could see for a half a day the countless millions of frequencies that we're bombarded with, and how we're just our brains. And there's a proof that this is true. There's a few places like this in the world. There's a hotel deep in a cave, and I think it's like a 2-story hotel. I forget the name. It was one in Kentucky, and there's one in New Mexico. You have to make reservations like a year in advance. It's very, very deep in the cave. People make this reservation, they wait a year to spend the night in a hotel, and it's very deep, and you're basically free of all this EMR that bombards our tissues every microsecond to insanity. And people think they're seeing ghosts. The place isn't haunted. The people are hallucinating. What they're doing is, for the first time, kind of like the people that leave Plato's caves and they could see the sun, scares the hell out of them. They want to go back down to the deep hole, back into Plato's cave analogously. People get scared as hell when they finally try to spend the night. They can't sleep. They're hallucinating. But what they're actually doing is they're actually experiencing what our ancestors were when they were. And I think Native Americans said that we would reach the end of humanity when human beings would start rejoicing in and consuming poison. Look at me. I mean, the fat guy covered in tattoos, who eats microwave. I freely admit, unfortunately, being so time pressed that I'm eating microwave food here and there. We're consuming poisons, we're bombarding our bodies with poisons. But one poison that people don't seem to recognize is this, just endless billions of frequencies passing through our body every microsecond. Anyway, I was trying to use that as an example of what it would be like to be free of that. These people never spend a night in this hotel in the deepest cave because it freaks them out, and they leave, they get frightened. But that's how our ancestors, had clarity and can see things. And I don't know, I'm just completely convinced that, not saying that we're de-evolving in a civilization, which we are, but I can't put all that blame on ourselves because we're degenerate materialists and, doing things, which we are. But some of that has to be attributable to how we're all collectively poisoning ourselves. In other words, we are to blame for, our own situations and the things that we do wrong that's wrongly pointed, but some of that blame, whatever percentage that is, has to be directed at, what we're collectively doing to each other and, just destroying our bodies and bombarding ourselves with this filth.
Speaking of frequencies, I was wondering about your view on, well, let's start with this. There's a company called Synergy Sciences that we work with. They basically have this proprietary liquid that they make. Obviously, we don't understand the workings of it, but basically what they say is it looks like an Arizona can. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this proprietary liquid that they have put together in a lab, there's been many studies that they have done in Germany, apparently, in a few different labs, that shows that it creates a toroidal field around this Arizona can, right? This liquid does, and it releases electrons that actually prevent so not the frequency from passing through you, but the radiation within the frequency and EMFs. Yes. So I was wondering about your thoughts. So, and if I could go a little further, you just spoke about electrons and how they don't exist, right? Did I understand you correctly?
Well, the principle does exist, obviously.
The principle.
But it's not, that would be like me inventing a slap particle. We all know what a slap is. Well, there's no such thing as a slap particle. It's energy transference, and it manifests like feeling, something already hits you. I mean, as a crude analogy. So no, I mean.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to understand, we have a lot of therapeutic techniques that we do over here within the Syncretism Academy. And one of them is being grounded. There's a lot of research behind it. I'm sure you're very aware of that. That if I could even pull it up quickly, I could even read exactly.
I wonder how the device works. I mean, a Faraday cage
Well,
works as well.
yeah. Before I even get into the device, I just want to see what your thoughts about being physically grounded to the earth. And
I
if this,
completely agree with that. I mean, when I'm at my cabin, I go barefoot. I don't care if my feet get muddy. My grandfather, and I've told this people in live stream many times, there is at least 1,000 what we call esoteric, and I say esoteric like this, videos that I love to make that I can't make. I mean, my grandfather taught me how to do dowsing. Dowsing, if you know how to do it, it works. People say, and also too, I've talked about Ouija boards, and if you're super scientific, and I'm using that as an insult. Well, there's a piece, Parker Brothers, a modern Ouija board. And I made a video recently about a talisman. Well, there's just a piece of cardboard with, ABC, XYZ, and a piece of plastic. So that's exactly what it is. It's a talisman. Yeah. I say, when my grandfather taught me how to dowse, you could use sticks, you could use copper rods. I mean, that's all they are, but that's not the point. The talisman is a focusing device. It's a focusing device of the consubstantial nature of what we truly are. We use that as a talisman. The true, of course, when we think of a talisman, we think of, some sort of object you put up, it's brass or gold. Oh, look, it's a talisman. But you got it hanging from the rear view mirror. That's our current idea of a talisman. But the Greek definition of a talisman is as a device through which we focus our energies and we do things. And I have, and this has happened several times. Last time it happened was about 9 months ago. I needed this part desperately. I couldn't find it, couldn't order a replacement. I spent, stupidly, hours looking for this stupid part. I said, what the hell am I doing? I know how to do this. I have copper wire all over the place. I bent up some dowsing rods. It took me less than 2 minutes to find it after that. That was after 6 hours of looking for the damn thing.
Wow.
But if I made videos like that, well, this guy's crazy.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, well.
Or Dr. Dent is one last story in this. I can make a video about this. I've hinted at it before. Dr. Nandakiji Kumaraswamy was given the rights to his works by Rama P. Kumaraswamy, and you could look him up. He was the son of Dr. Nandakiji Kumaraswamy. I talked to him on the phone. He's a friend of mine, gave me his father's works. There's a guy named Fenimore. He's a brilliant metaphysician and perennialist. He's a well-known author. He said Rama P. Kumaraswamy came into the dreams of both me and my wife. We both had the same dream, and we were told to, no one would believe me if I made a video about this. We both had the same dream that we're supposed to look for this guy. We have no idea what his name is. They're referring to me. We eventually went out to dinner and met. He doesn't live too far away from me, and he had no idea that I lived close to him. But anyway, they were both given this dream to look for this person that's talking about his father and meet him. And that was me. And, no one would ever believe a video like that. Even if I were to watch it, because well, this guy's kind of nutty.
Yeah. But there's research being done behind it. I mean, Santos, you know this, right? They're doing a lot of research with ground. It reduces inflammation, cardiovascular disease. It helps with cardiovascular issues, muscle damage, with chronic pain, the mood, stimulates kidney function. There is research behind this. So I'm just curious about your thoughts. When you are grounded, and if it's not electrons, right, like they say it is it the ether?
The electrostatic field that we actually have that's also too visible with Kirlian photography. I wanted to get heavily into Kirlian photography. So the problem is it's heavy equipment intensive, but also too these cryptochromes. If I told somebody that you could stay awake, unfortunately, for 3 days by hovering your head over a giant monster magnet, because I used to experiment with, and I still have it in my hallway there, buried deep in the closet, this giant, super expensive $1,000 monster magnet. It affects the cryptochromes in your eyes. I mean, you feel elevated, like you've had a bunch of caffeine, but there's no side effects. It will keep you awake. It'll keep you lit for 2 or 3 days. And it affects the cryptochromes in your eyes. You can also too feel that field. It's absolutely fascinating.
Insane.
And if you take a powerful magnet, you can actually feel it on the tips of your toe, on the tips of your nose, and on your lips. Also too, right around your wrist. And people say, well, this doesn't make any sense. Well, I made a holographic magnetic viewing device by, cutting myself open purposely, squirting out some blood and making a holographic viewing device, because that's all ferrofluid is nanoparticles of iron actually suspended in a surfactant. And that's all this iron in your blood is. And nobody believed me years ago when I started talking about the stuff like, hey, the books that Rawls and Davis made about magnetic exposure, is real. I mean, I wished I was told stuff like that in high school or college. You could radically affect crops, radically affect, like if you have a pain in your side, of course, whether you use the North Pole or the magnet of the South Pole, there's some things you don't want to grow, like a tumor, for example. So you need to know what you're doing. But everybody that's actually duplicated that experiment, it's like, you're right, I didn't believe you. All these thousands of people say that, you know, you could radically affect plant growth, how fast they grow.
Amazing.
I've done the alfalfa seed experiment, at least 100 times. I mean, the North Pole exposed seeds, they grow poorly. Tons of seeds die. They don't actually germinate when they actually reach to fruition, when you're supposed to eat the sprouts, which is after 7 days. They smell bad. They taste bad. They look bad. They're watery. The South Pole exposed alfalfa sprouts, they're healthy. They're hearty. They smell great. They taste great. They're crunchy. There's fewer seed death. I've done that experiment literally over and over and over again until I'm just ready to puke.
Wow.
There's some guy in Colorado saying he's growing magic weed. It's like, well, good for you.
Get me his number, please. So I've seen your experiments with seeds, and apparently the South Pole is blue shift, and that's healthier than the North Pole red shift. Is that correct?
Yeah, for water, yeah, it's actually a temporal displacement at a ratio of 1 to 5, 1 on the North Pole and 1.618 on the South Pole. You'll also too see that, and I've got hundreds of examples of that, of the light that's actually red shifted and blue shifted. That's how birds navigate. We know that we navigate via magnetism, but they don't see magnetism. They don't see magnetic fields. So how are they actually navigating? And whether they're colorblind or not makes no distinction. They can actually see the phase disparity. They know whether they're turned towards the north or turned towards the south. So, but water is a polar molecule. I mean, this is not my opinion. It's a fact. And also too, water is, and I have that same geometry tattooed right here on the back of my hand, the Pythagorean, the only perfect, this is not my opinion, these are the words of the Pythagoreans, and who knows before them, the only perfect incommensurable geometry in the entire universe is that 108, 36, 36 isosceles triangle, which in triplicate, if you actually duplicate it 3 times, makes up the Pythagorean pentagram. That's also too the geometry of water. And the incommensurability of the field geometry of water, people say we're carbon-based life forms. Like, no, we're water-based, and without water, we're just a pile of dust. And that water analogously in the radio broadcast metaphor, which you can't take too far, but is nearly perfect, is the antenna, if you will, for conscious to manifest within the psychophysical body. And of course, we're polluting our own water with countless things that we do and do wrong, and we all know what those are. But I think that's the reason for a lot of current human, I don't want to use the word insanity, but
that is a very, very important point you made there about water and carbon and the difference there, Ken. My mind's going all over the place with that one. We could do a whole show on that, I reckon. Hydrogen is so important, isn't it?
Hydrogen, yeah. As the building block of all matter.
Yeah.
And then oxygen, that incommensurability, and also too of the oxygen and hydrogen, that specific geometry that sits at. But what is it that makes that and there's also millions of YouTube videos and countless books written on water being almost magical. And of course, it is the basis of life, but it has a lot of really strange properties that no scientist has been able to explain. And they haven't been able to explain for many valid reasons, because it is not quantitative of the water itself, it's qualitative of the actual geometry of the water. And what is it about the geometry of the water which makes life possible? No branch of science is ever going to explain that. It's like looking, scientist goes looking in a body for the soul. There's no soul in the body. There's no signal in the radio. There's no little people inside the TV. And then the idiot scientist steps outside of his own house and looks in the window and says, nobody lives there.
Yeah, for sure. See, that's also, like I like to talk about, especially when me and you were talking about it, the hard problem of consciousness. I mean, it's obviously your consciousness is not located within the brain. I mean, that's a given. You know that you're not developing and having that experience within the brain. It's almost as if there's this outside field and you're this antenna and it's coming within it like a frequency. I was wondering about that, actually, to ask you about this. Scientists are having this big issue, which is the hard problem of consciousness. They can't figure it out. They can't figure out why we experience this first person.
It's non-local. It's non-local. It's not there. Just as there is no. You look at a map, there's a North Pole and there's a South Pole. They're not there. Well, sure there is. I got an magnetic film. I could say there's an. Well, you can't. It's not there. It's not a location. It's not a topos, a specific Cartesian coordinate. There's a north pole. There's well, you can't. You can't separate it because you separate it, you'll have now a whole new magnet over here in North Pole. So North Pole over here, North Pole and South Pole, and we're dealing with incommensurability. And God, lordy, defining incommensurability is not easy. That is, by the way, this is a direct quote that we can attribute to true Pythagoreans. One of the very few is that the one and only secret of the Pythagoreans, the true secret, is the definition, meaning, and implication of incommensurability. It is the one secret for which a man was killed. He was drowned out on a boat. I forget his name, escapes me right now, for spreading out the secret of incommensurability, the secret of the Pythagoreans.
Wow.
One secret.
And essentially, that secret uncovers the ether, and the ether is one of the eliminating of it is one of the biggest lies of humanity. That really this show really needed to be done.
Oh yeah,
we really
Most
needed to talk
definitely.
about the ether. It's, to me, it's just the alchemists of old and the Neoplatonists, how much they loved the quintessence and spoke of it as though if you knew of it, even if you just knew of it, you were godlike. Your mind was expanded. It was just the most amazing gift. So
Nailed it.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Ken, I don't know how you are. I don't know how you are on time. I don't know how much time we have with you. We're running 90 minutes. We don't want to take up too much of your night.
No. It's okay. It's okay with you. You tell me when to cut it off, what to extend. It's all fine with me.
You tell us. You tell us what you're free with, Santos.
Well, I'm good for.
We could always do this again. We would love to have you back, Ken. You really are a superstar in our eyes, and I mean, we would really love a part two.
Oh, this video is going to get hundreds of thousands of hits on my channel. I know.
For sure.
Because of you, not because of me, because I haven't done anything. I'm nobody.
No, it will be directly because of you. Ken.
Definitely. Everyone, I think every second video, if I don't mention Ken Wheeler, I'm not directing people to a place where they will learn about the ether, magnetism, electricity and dielectricity are three field modalities that I learned from Ken Wheeler. The thing is, we need to see this. I think those videos that you've made, Ken, are a treasure. People need to see how you can show the red shift and the blue shift. How you can see the dielectric black light and the white light. People need to understand this. This is the fundamental mother nature that you talk about. Very simplex, very simple. Once people learn this and see this with their own eyes, this is why I always mention your channel Theoria Apophasis, because there people's minds will be expanded. Because if you've ever gone to school, like Ken said earlier on in the show, the boring professors, they were just running around in circles and not teaching you anything. Because they teach you the wrong model. Walter Russell smashed the atomic model in Atomic Suicide. Once you see the correct model, which is the reciprocating processional hyperboloid torus field, your mind opens up. You begin to understand that there is an ether. Something happens to you. You become intelligent. Both Ken and I love intelligence. Ken holds it as one of the great principles, including love and truth, of course. But
everything's either the ether or the privation of the ether. This thing that we call space doesn't exist. Quote Nikola Tesla once again, space has no properties. Nikola Tesla specifically said that space is not a thing. We can't reify it as some sort of monster that does things or acts upon things. The ancient Indians talked about the rope snake metaphor. Back then, of course, there was no cure for a snake bite. And of course, people would wander out in the night, to use the bathroom, if you will, and they would see a piece of rope. And some people literally died thinking they were frightened to death. An old person with a heart attack, for example. Looking at a piece of rope, thinking it was a snake. They're about to get bitten and suffer horribly. How can that which does not exist act upon other things. It is
Sure.
not a thing in itself. Neither is a shadow. Space is no different than a shadow. Shadow doesn't exist. Shadow is a concept reification of the absence of light. Same thing with emptiness. Emptiness, space, shadow, chaos, all these things are conceptual abstractions that human came up with that Mother Nature has never heard of, never created, and has nothing damn well
I
to
love
do
this
with.
guy.
These things do not exist. They do not exist. If we say unicorn, every person on earth has an immediate mental image of a unicorn, but we all damn well know it doesn't exist.
Of
And
course.
it's great for science fiction movies. The same thing is true of space and emptiness and waves. Oh Lord, scientists love nothing better than to talk about waves. And if you ask them what a field is, you offer them $1 million, and I'll be really, really brief now. They can never tell you what a field is. What they will
No.
say if you press them. So, well, there's $1 million in a line. Well, they're lines of force. Well, force is not a thing. Force is done by something upon something else. So we're talking about an action in a crude
Yeah.
sense.
Yep.
And
Yep,
they're not
absolutely.
lines. They came up with those lines by seeing constructive and destructive interference, by looking at magnetic lines of constructive and destructive interference. But this is not a thing. I mean, waves do not exist. So waves, space, emptiness, and shadows and chaos, these are all exactly one and the same thing. These are concepts that have no basis in reality and have no connection to Mother Nature. What was the five again? Space, waves, emptiness, shadows, and chaos. There we go.
Chaos.
There's a few others actually, but
Wow.
those are all the exact same thing. And time, excuse me, most importantly, number 6,
Time.
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 Time does not exist at all.
Exist. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Old man Kronos. So
It exists conventionally, but it doesn't exist ultimately. Something that
No.
partakes of time, partakes of mass and magnitude.
Yeah.
Every ancient culture said time was the number 4, and that's the reason why Fibonacci sequence, i.e. the Pythagorean sequence of true, people love to say golden ratio, but they say golden ratio. Well, explain the golden ratio. I have no idea. It's just golden ratios, like beauty and nature. It's like, well, you know, that's superficially, that's accurate, but you still don't know what the golden ratio makes implicit mention to. What does it actually have any ultimate meaning? And
Yeah.
it's a proportionality of 1 to 5, because phi is 1. Phi is the 1 is 1 is to phi. And this is the reason why 1 over 5 to the power of -3 equals totality from the, that's the Pythagorean secret, by the way, hidden in Plato's Republic 509D to 511. That would take hours to explain.
Yep.
So
Wow.
Yep.
I won't get on that topic.
Wait, but Ken, promise us one thing right here now, please. One thing.
What's
You're
that?
gonna come back on.
Only if you want me to. I mean, other people like, is that
All right, I'll take that as a yes.
pretty boring. I won't drink as much caffeine next time.
No, and actually, you know, it'd be great if we could line up a bunch of questions too by
Yeah.
some of our viewers. If you could do that for us, Ken, that would be magical, buddy. If we could get some questions answered from our viewers, it'll be really something
For
special.
sure.
Yeah.
For
Oh,
sure. There's-
whenever you want. I love talking. With you two kind gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. We just want to thank you again, Ken, for joining us. It was really something special. Sending blessings your way, my friend. Really, yeah. I think our time is.
yeah, especially for me.
That's what
I just have to say for my viewers that they will know how significant this interview
Oh yeah.
is for me. It really is a pinnacle of.
I'm nobody. Definitely
for
no.
my channel.
I really mean that. I'm
No,
nobody.
you're just
I
a
should've
humble
talked
man, but you are somebody. And
But what you're teaching and what you have is a treasure. It is a treasure because people there will expand their minds. Divine magnetism. Sri Yukteswar, over 100 years ago in the book, The Holy Science, he called magnetism divine magnetism. So we're dealing with divinity. We're dealing with something that is more than us. When you go to school, they reduce you to the atomic theory so that you get
Yeah.
blocked.
Sure.
You know, they tell you that gold is different to nitrogen, is different to sodium, but Walter Russell explained that these are they're all different frequencies.
Yeah,
Frequencies of the same
harmonic
thing.
harmonic intervals of one and the exact same thing.
And they do that deliberately so that you can't go past a certain point. You can't grow in your knowledge of physics. So when you go to
everything.
They know what they're
Sorry.
doing.
They pigeonhole everything. Well, over here we have magnetism. Over here we have gravity. Over here they're all one thing. Mother Nature.
it's all
doesn't
one
do
thing.
that.
Yeah.
Yep. So
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize for that.
not at all.
No,
So
you're-
folks, go on over to Theoria Apophasis and check out all the toroidal field videos that Ken has put out. It's just an amazing encyclopedia of knowledge and wisdom, ancient wisdom, and you see with your own eyes. You know,
Yes.
the field is there. The ether exists.
Yes.
And that's how we will finish our show. If you want some last words there, Ken.
Большое спасибо, увидимся.
Красавчик.
That was Russian. That was Russian for thank you
It
very
was.
much.
Yeah.
That was Russian
It's
for
amazing. You really
thank
are
you.
amazing, buddy. Really, really.
Russian
Thank
is-
you all for joining us. And stay tuned for episode 6. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.